Cool. Hello, everyone. Before we get into the topic, because I do want to address the intentions behind what we're going to be talking about, and obviously I'm going to introduce us and my esteemed panel that we're going to be chatting with. But can I just get a raise of hands from the audience? First and foremost, who here is a founder? Awesome. Got a great group of founders. Who here is an investor? Who here is a DFI? No. Anyone from corporate? Government? Okay, so pretty much everyone that's relevant to who's going to care about this topic, which is great. Right, so before I get into introducing ourselves, sorry, I'm going to monologue for like 3 minutes, but I'm going to hand over to you completely. It's what I tend to do. But the point here is we all come from different organizations, and we all have different goals and agendas for what we want to achieve and see within entrepreneurship and the ecosystem in Africa. But, you know, at the end of the day, I was chatting to Niccolo about this off stage, is that if we don't scale businesses, that's kind of the whole point, whether we're talking about exits, whether we're talking about raising. At the end of the day, if we want this ecosystem to thrive, we need to scale businesses, and that's what we care about, and that's what we're here for today. So I hope it's a topic that's going to blend all of our interests into one single point, and that's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about what scaling is, what it really requires, what it means, how do we go about building a scalable business, how fundraising changes, what the ecosystem needs. So there's quite a few topics we're going to get into, but for now, I think that's enough of me talking. I'll introduce myself last. I'm going to hand over to the people on my panel. Michelle, would you like to go first and introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Wesson. I'm from Nomadic Minds, and at Nomadic Minds we do 3 things. So first of all, we invest via a vehicle called Kili Ventures, and Kili Ventures is in partnership with one of the biggest Italian funds called Primo Ventures, where we have recently closed one of our deals in a retail tech startup in Morocco called Wafer. The second thing that we do is organizing exclusive investor events around the world. These events usually bring about 10 billion in capital, and the main purpose of these events is connecting startups and the local ecosystem to investors from Silicon Valley. The third thing that we do is arranging and organizing tailor-made accelerator programs. We've been working with these programs in emerging markets with one of the biggest accelerators, which you probably heard of already, called the EBRD Star Venture Program, and another example would be OKFES. So I'm happy to talk to all of you today, and it's an honor to be here among the brightest minds in Africa.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicolas. I'm a senior venture associate at Plug and Play. Just to briefly describe who Plug and Play is, what we are. So some people recognize us as a venture capital, some people recognize us as an accelerator, and even some people recognize us as a corporate innovation platform. So what I like to say is that generally Plug and Play is all of that put together. I like to describe it as a global innovation ecosystem. So we started as a venture capital, and venture capital is our bread and butter back in 2006. Early stage investors in companies such as PayPal, Dropbox. We're very active within the Silicon Valley tech scene, and Silicon Valley in Sunnyvale is still our main headquarter. And today we're present in approximately 65 different offices across 45 different countries. And really we're working at the forefront of innovation together by mixing what is VC and what is corporate innovation. So having a network of startups on the one hand and a large network of corporate partners on the other to make sure that we're able to create innovation through these connection between the 2 players. It's a pleasure.
Cool, thank you for those introductions. I guess to finish this off so you can all understand who I am and why I am moderating this conversation. So I'm Cameron Coots. By profession, I'm an organizational psychologist, but what you should probably know me as is the co-founder of Metavolve. And at Metavolve, what we do is we are business strategy coaches and facilitators. Our purpose is to accelerate the time it takes to build a great sustainable business. And our mission is to ensure that as many entrepreneurs as possible can take a holiday where they actually switch off while their business keeps growing. To date, we've worked with over 100 founders across, I think, 17 countries now, if I'm not mistaken, with the most recent cohort. We've achieved results of 400% growth in revenue, 82% growth in net profit, all within less than a year. But my favorite stat, because it's our mission, is that all the founders that we worked with have been able to take more time off after working with us than ever before. Besides that, I'm also the host of the Founder Files podcast, which is the #1 rated podcast for entrepreneurs in South Africa. Thank you. And episode 100 is getting released next week, so that's quite a cool milestone. And yeah, thank you for having me. But I
love it for you, love it.
Thank you. I love it for me too. All right, so enough about me talking. I'm keen to hear some more of your voices. But just to get straight into the topic, what does scaling actually mean, and what does successful look like? Who wants to go first?
I don't mind. So I think scaling is not just about growth, but it's more about sustainably growing. So it's about making sure that you create systems and structures that allow your business to grow profitably and also efficiently while maintaining your core values and what you stand for at the end of the day. Successfully scaling, this involves not just achieving your numbers. Numbers are important, yes, but you also need to build a business that can be resilient, adaptable, and impactful in the market that you are serving. And that for me means scaling successfully.
That was beautifully succinct. Nicola, over you.
Yeah, I think I can echo what you said very much. So for me, it's not too much about the sole concept of scaling, but really the sustainability into the scaling process is what really matters, right? And what we often mean by sustainability in the scaling process, it means having a process which is actually replicable. I think during this panel, you'll be listening to me talk a lot about frameworks and processes, just because I see every time I talk to startups, even startups that are going not just pre-seed and seed stage, but they're going into Series A, Series B stage, you can see kind of like that mindset shift, especially when that sustainability and scaling is actually kicking in. So what I always tell them is, if you want to scale, and scaling can mean very different things. It can mean going to a different country, or having or creating a new product, right? Whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's like going to a new geography, trying to get new customers, creating a new product, you need to make sure that your core product, core system, core geography has a system in place, a process that can be easily replicable. And at the same time, that whatever your geography or your product that you're focusing in right now, wherever that is, you have a process in place for which you can be much more hands-off, and you're actually able to focus on your next steps. This becomes generally easier when you move through time, right? So the more you've been working on your company, the more you're scaling, you enter in one market, creating one other product, second product, third product. It's going to become easier and easier. But from the very beginning, making sure that you have that process and that you have a system for scaling that can scale almost indefinitely without breaking, I think that's what successful scaling really means, in a sense.
Yeah, thank you. I love both of your answers. How I'd consolidate that is exactly what our whole philosophy is at MedEvolve. And the way I like to explain it is removing the founder's trap. In other words, removing the dependence that a business has on the founder. In order to do that, you need standardized processes, systems, you need a clear customer experience, you need to focus on one market in the way that you're doing this, and have a management team that can execute. Because when you do that, you can now be the innovator and go out there and do what you want in terms of growth and not get in the way of your core business. And that's when serious growth starts to happen and scale. So thank you for introducing that. I know I prepared questions for you, but I did warn you that I'm going to just be a bit more flexible on this. Nicola, as a psychologist, you bring up the word mindset, and immediately I want to latch on to that. You talk about how mindset for entrepreneurs kind of shifts around Series A, Series B. Can you elaborate on what you mean?
Yes, totally. So let me give you the investor's perspective. So at Plug and Play, majority of our investments are pre-seed and seed. And what you're looking at when you're looking for a pre-seed seed startup, you're especially looking for people. So you're literally investing before offline. Of course, we made the offstage. Sorry, we made the reference of the jockey versus the horse. So pre-seed and seed, you're literally investing in the jockey, whereas at later stage, so starting from Series A, you are investing in the horse. So what that means is, from the very beginning, we're looking at founders that are visionaries. But the vision only goes so far. Having a vision just means that you're able to see in the future and you're able to see what your landing point actually is. But not every founder has the capability of starting from that final landing point and building a strategy that goes backwards and actually being able to execute at every step of the way. That is ultimately the change.
Unless they work with Metavolve.
Of course, of course.
I gotta you talk about plug and play. I've got a self-plug in there.
Please.
All right, so so much happens when we need to scale, right? I mean, whether it's, we've spoken about standardizing processes, systems, focusing on core markets. A couple other things that we need to obviously talk about is building in management structures, developing a clear culture, talent management, talent acquisition. We start really getting into the whole realm of moving from founder to business leader. So I guess the broader topic that I want to focus on is, like, with all of that in mind, it requires solid foundations. So what do we need to do to build really true solid foundations for scale? Michelle?
So from my opinion, I would say that when in the early days, when a startup starts out, everything is quite all over the place, scrappily done, not really any processes are aligned. And I would say to be able to scale faster and with a lot of making sure everything works as it should, I think you should have financial systems, operational workflows, customer engagement strategies, and remember that there's a lot of technology out there that can help you to automate processes. This can help you tremendously to make it much easier to scale that business. Make sure that you have clear SOPs and well-documented workflows that goes along with that. I would also like to just add on here that in terms of the founder going from a hands-on doer, doing everything, you now as a founder need to move into a more strategic leadership role. And this can be difficult. So I would say let's invest in that founder to either get the training that they need to help them to be this leader, or to hire people that are skilled in scale-ups and help them to scale more, because this can make a world's difference to your business. And in terms of talent acquisition, I would say that there's, as we know, a lot of shortages in talent around Africa, and making sure that you rely on your early employees to help them to get the training that they need to adapt to your scale up, and make sure that you are creating hybrid roles for their transition if that is what's needed.
I fully agree with everything you've said there. The only question that I have is, how do we do all of that at once? Nicola, no pressure. What are your thoughts?
Does it really have to happen all at once? So that's the point, right? So you said it very well. At the very beginning, everybody does everything. And this is why I hear many people, I want to go work in a startup, because especially when there's like 5 people on the ground, it's not like you have somebody that's going to look at the finances, somebody that's going to look at strategy, somebody that's going to look at growth. You're going to sit at a table and you're all looking at the same thing together. But this, of course, the moment you scale, will need to change. So for me, it's not about how do we make it happen all at once. How do you create a process? And again, talking again about process and framework, how do you create a process that works for your company? And this would be the first big it depends of the whole conversation, because every single company is different. But how do you create a process? How do you create a framework that allows your specific company to scale internally, again, single product, single market, in the most efficient way possible? Because remember, it's always easy to scale if you have a lot of cash to burn. But the reality is that the majority of you will have to scale with very, very limited resources. And this is the reality for the largest majority of startups across the continent and across the world. So how do you make that process very efficient? And how do you ensure that that process is fully replicable. And here the replicability comes back, because if you want to create scale, the base of the scale, it's actually creating economies of scale that you can just take the model, plug it. It's almost brain one and brain two. You don't need to think about it, and you need to just be able to forget the sunk costs. You drop what doesn't work, and you keep what works, and you keep replicating until it works for you.
Yeah, so the way I like to think about that is, as founders, we're such good innovators, especially within the market and with products, and that's going to be the next topic. But I think this is the main shift when we're getting into scaling, is how do we take that natural innovative approach and transition it from looking at external innovation and focusing on internal innovation within the company, to start looking at improving efficiencies and turn in this flywheel engine that can really, as you say, be replicable. You mentioned the point of it depends. Now I'm going to ask the most it depends question like ever. But on the point now with how do we balance this point of replicability and making sure we're focused on our core markets and our core products? Because, you know, when we're scaling, it's not like we suddenly have like 80% market share and now we've hit like a ceiling and we have to go to a different market. If you've done that and you're still on the scaling journey, then I'm very interested. But I think the point, there's still so much growth potential within the core market that we're in. But what's often, there's this pressure from investors, we've got to be taking this international. There's also the interest that will come from our CTO or even from the CEO about like these ideas of new products and new opportunities. How do we balance that? How do we balance this combination between focusing in the core markets, but also developing new products, new ideas, and entering new markets at the same time? What does that look like? Yeah, do you want to go first?
Okay, so it's a complicated question, but I get to it. So you mentioned especially like sometimes you have a lot of external inputs and external pushes that will ask you to grow your products, to grow your markets, to go somewhere else. It needs to be the right time for you, and you as the entrepreneur are the sole person that will know when the time is right. My suggestion is always get feedback and get suggestions from both people that are incentivizing your company, but also people that have zero incentives in your company. It's good to take feedback from your investors, but always remember that your investors have a bias because those investors have LPs. Taking suggestions also from mentors and from other people that could guide you a bit in that decision. My opinion, and this is what I tend to say to the majority of startups, is yes, of course, me as an investor, I want you to grow and I want you to scale, and ideally speaking, you will be able to grow from $100,000 in revenue to a $10 million in revenue, $20 million in revenue in 2 to 3 years. That would be fantastic. That's great. But not every company has the same path. For some businesses, it will take 1 year. For some other businesses, potentially much more deep tech, and there can be many different things. It can take 5, 6 years. You need licenses. You need regulation to be on par. So for me, it's much more as focus on one thing. I always say it's way better to be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a large pond, because you can be eaten up very, very quickly. You want to focus on your niche and to focus on your market in a way that you are able to create a critical mass that attracts others. It attracts network, it attracts customers, it attracts investors, in a way that people are almost left out and are already ready to jump in to whatever is your next step. This works with investors, but it works with network partners, and it also works with customers. And at the same time, expand, whether it's product, growth, horizontal, vertical, expand only and only when your core product, core business, core geography is potentially generating substantial revenues and has that critical mass to attract new customers, that you don't really have to think about it, and that other people can do what you have been doing for the past 2 to 3 years very easily, because you transferred a process, you transferred always this same concept of framework. People are able to replicate it, and you're already able to focus on the next step. For me, there's really 2 big things. It's one thing is being able to create a company and scaling that company in a single market, and the other thing is taking that company and scaling into another market. And here comes 2 processes. The first one is single market process. You need to learn that, put it in place, and make it run automatically. And then there's a process of moving to the other country or moving to the other product. That bridge is another process. How you do it is going to depend on you to understand how the market dynamics for your product and business work. Once you have that process, you're able to replicate it. Now you're not just moving from one market to another market, one product to another product, but you're able to have teams that go from 2 markets to 4 markets, from 4 markets to 10 markets. And then your mind is going to be on, oh, how do I exit, potentially.
Super insightful. Thanks, Nicola. Michelle, what are your thoughts on how we balance all this complexity of core market, new products, new expansion, etc., as a founder, as a business?
I have one word for that, and that would be focus. So you started as a founder with something that you feel you believe in and you know that you can do because that's your core strength, right? So focus on your core strength. Focus on what you have been doing. As Nicola said, you need to attract people. So even if you are raising a small fund or a small amount of money, the more you raise, the more traction you build, the more exposure you get to yourself, the more you can keep focus on yourself, because investors, accelerator programs, everyone would come to you to talk to you because you have achieved this by just focusing on what you believe you should be doing. So I would say prioritize your high markets, your high impact markets, and your product, and then ensure that your scaling efforts are strategic and not just acting on all of the options that are available to you. So don't chase the options, but stay true to who you are.
Thank you. I think if I had to blend both of those answers, the combination between focus, but also knowing that we're going to be getting pressure from investors to grow, it's kind of your job, right, to grow those companies. But the short answer in between that is like what we're seeing here is that we actually want to trust you as the founder, CEO, to have that focus, say no, know when the right time is. Taking that pressure to grow is a good thing, but ultimately it's still your business, right? Making that decision when the best time to grow is because, I mean, that desire is aligned. I've never met an entrepreneur that doesn't want to grow. But on the topic of growth now, right, I think there's also an interesting view that I have is that once you are now post-product market fit, especially post-profitability, you're at a point now where you can now start reallocating funds, your own funds, into your growth as a business. So now the reason why you're doing fundraising when you're at scale stage now kind of changes compared to in the earlier stages, is just to be able to get you to product market fit and profitability. But on that topic now, talk to me how, besides the very high-level points I just made, how does fundraising and the approaches towards fundraising change when you're now in scale stage versus when you're in startup mode?
Sorry, I keep turning it on and off, not to have echo. So how does it change? It's a substantial change, right? So as you said, at the very beginning, there's a difference in what the investors want and what the investors are looking for. And I feel like whenever you're raising money, since you're actively selling your company to an investor, you need to understand what is the incentive structure behind the investor and what does the investor want at that point. So when you're a pre-seed and seed company, of course, we're looking primarily at the team, the market, what is the kind of like hidden potential of whatever it is that we're looking at. But of course, the moment in which you already have product market fit, as I mentioned before, we're looking more at execution. And it's execution which is related specifically to a certain vision, which the founder brought forward when they were like at pre-seed and seed stage. And we're looking for founders specifically that are able to execute on their mission. So in general, especially if you are a company who's now profitable. So let's make the example in which you are in 1 or 2 markets and you actually already reached profitability. So technically speaking, for your survival, you don't necessarily need funds, right? And it's a great spot to be in because for once, you have a breather. Like a lot of the founders that I speak with, and they said, I reached profitability. And I'm like, great. Like that's a great moment because you can see they have a certain peace of mind when they sit at the table and they know that they're not necessarily being haunted by the runway or by their burn. And it's a great feeling. But that's actually where the real challenge starts. It's how do you make this business from just profitable? how do you expand your burn? How do you increase your burn by raising more money to target a certain specific expansion? And here is where a lot of entrepreneurs kind of lose themselves, right? Because there's a great potential of increasing your burn in a non-sustainable way to the point that you were profitable yesterday, you're not necessarily going to be profitable tomorrow with the new business model, with the new direction. So for me, is again about having very clear steps when you go in front of an investors, making sure that you're able to describe what your next 2 to 3 years is going to look like. It's I'm raising X amount of money because I need to do this, this, and this. And at that point, realistically speaking, since you know your operation and you know your processes, you can already attribute a specific price tag to each of these activities. You know how many people you're going to need, you know how much these people are going to cost, at least approximately, and you know how much your operations actually cost in a market, and you can make the adjustment for the new market that you want to tackle. It's all about execution in my head.
I'm doing the same thing as you. I think that makes perfect sense, because when you have time check, is that 10 minutes? Cool. Totally lost my train of thought. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. So I would agree with what you said. I would like to just point out a few things from my end. So at seed stage, usually I would say that investors would be having a look at what is your runway and what's your burn rate, right? They would focus on how much time you have for seed funding, buys, and also reaching your milestones. Then they also want to look at your basic financial projections, right? So these are high level and often very optimistic. When you get to a scaling stage, this is where the investors are going to start looking at capital efficiency. How are you going to use the funds? What is going to drive return on investment? How are you going to reduce your dependency on these external funds? Then we also have to talk about the path to profitability. If you're not profitable at that point yet, you need to have concrete plans on how you're going to achieve profitability with this funding that you're getting. And lastly, I would say most important would be your break-even metrics. So indicate how and when the company would start being self-sustainable. So in summary, from my opinion, I would say at seed stage, the metric will focus on proving the idea and proving your initial traction, while scaling metrics would be more about profitability, efficiency, and sustainable growth, which investors at the scaling stage would expect more of a financial projection and operational data to see where you are heading in your scaling stage.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense to me. And one of my favorite sayings that resonates with everyone I say it to is top line is vanity, bottom line is sanity. And it's kind of at that point now where that sanity is not just for you as the founder, it's also for investors. It's like, how can we see what our path to sanity is, that this is actually going to be, at the end of the day, a sustainable business. So if it's not profitable, then it's not really going to be sustainable. And that now you've got product market fit, how can you turn this into a true sustainable organization? That's pretty much all that we've got time for in terms of what we prepped. I do obviously have some backup questions, but we would like to open this up to the floor. Do we have any questions here for any of us on the panel that we'd like to explore? Cool, we got one right there.
Hi, I am Sona from Senegal, and I have a question for you. You say that funders may be sure that their scalability actions should be strategic. And to you, what do you mean by what's strategic scalability actions?
So I would say it would also depend on, let's say, the industries that you're working in, but I would say strategy actions to take care of and mainly focus on would be make sure you have a team that is driven with your mission of the company on what you want to do in scaling your company, as well as make sure that if you're going from a hands-on founder, that you have the experience to go, or maybe just find then the training to go into a leadership and strategic role of leading your team into a new scale up, into a new market, into a new product, and making sure that you have the backing of everyone that can adapt to what would be the next big thing for your company and scaling. Make sure that when you get investors, that they are not just bringing capital, but let them bring also experience, mentorship, have them bring networking, and make sure that these investors also align with your core values, and make sure to stick and focus on what you as a startup would like to have your business be at the end of the day.
Thank you.
So I actually want to expand on that, and I'd say I'd combine it in terms of simplification, standardization, but then also, unfortunately, I don't have one word for this, but it's like building out like a strong complementary leadership team. Because especially when you start getting to scale stage, your business is at a level of complexity where you can't do everything yourself. But also you've got this reality and this kind of problem where no one knows your business like you. So now you're either having to promote people through the ranks that have been Swiss Army knives, like you have been, or you're having to bring in new people that come into a management or leadership layer that don't understand your business at all. So really taking the process to simplify your market positioning, what your competitive landscape looks like, making sure this is documented, easy to understand, what the strengths and weaknesses are of the business, knowing what it is that your growth strategy is going to be, what the vision is. All of these strategic elements that are quite intangible are so important to just get out of your head. And it's not about formulating a strategy, it's more around getting the strategy out of your head that is working and making sure that the people around you, your management team, your investors, can deeply understand it. That's going to be the most meaningful way for you to be able to take a step back and, one, trust other people to do their jobs, but also, two, to allow people outside of your business to know exactly how they're supposed to help you. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Pietro. I just wanted to ask to you guys if you can share with us like some successful examples along your career, and if there's something concerning other projects that you could have done like better in order to reach this scalability of the businesses that you worked with. Thank you.
Cool. We'll go. Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, certainly. No, it's a great question. To answer on that, I want to answer on the second part first, right? So, because this is very intrinsic, for example, to the work that we do at Plug and Play specifically, and the way in which we help the companies. And within the conversation, you mentioned specifically that you should always get in investors that have some form of an added value, which is not a general absolute added value, it's an added value to your specific company, right? So if you're building a fintech, make sure that your investor has the right context with the banks, the right context with the regulators. Same thing goes if you're going to an insurtech, IGTech, and so on and so forth. So what we usually do at Plug and Play, like the main difference that I was explaining before, is we have an innovation ecosystem which is based on startups on the one side and corporate partners on the other side. So these corporate partners are specifically large corporations on 25 different verticals. So usually the way in which we work with the startups specifically is we try to provide them with the right business development opportunities at the right time, in a way that these startups are actually able to scale in a quite organic and sustainable way throughout time. So how does that effectively look like, and successful examples? Well, it looks like we directly work with the corporates in understanding what the corporates' needs are from an innovation perspective. So you would have the large insurance company come to us and saying, oh, we need to automate these, specifically the claiming process for PNC within this policy line. Great. How do we do it? We're not going to be doing the automation. We're not the company, the consultant that goes down and actively works on the automation software. Instead, we would matchmake this company with some of the best startups, which, of course, pushing forward and foremost our portfolio companies, the best startups in that space that are actually able to solve that problem. And it's hard for me to give you a single example, primarily because we are invested in over 2,000 businesses globally. But I can tell you this is something on average within a single office, a single location. I think if you even consider just one single stream, one accelerator program, out of 20 startups, probably at least 25-30% of them will get at least one POC, one pilot with one of the large corporates. This, of course, depends on the location, depends on the vertical. Some verticals require more time, but we've had multiple cases through time. So a lot of the unicorns that we have in our portfolio, many of them have had multiple engagements, multiple contract releases that have happened with some of the corporate partners of Plug and Play through introductions that were directly made on a specific innovation topic for the specific partner. So again, this concludes and goes back to the point of today during some of the panels I heard somebody saying it's not just the investor that needs to make the due diligence on the startups, it's especially the startup that needs to make the due diligence on the investor. And it's very true for the majority of cases. The startups that come to us, sometimes we have conversation, a first chat, a first call, and I ask, how much do you know about Plug and Play? And the response is very little. So you should spend a little bit of time in understanding if the investor is a fit for you. Because often case, you're very much following, rightly so, you're very much following the money and you're very much trying to close a specific round so that you can focus on operations. But there's a lot more that comes other than just a simple $50, $100, $1 million ticket. Doesn't matter how much the size is. It matters is this investor good for your next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. I hope I sort of answer your questions.
Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to answer that, and Michelle would as well, I've been properly time-checked now, so we need to close out. I think just to keep it super succinct around time, like 1 or 2 sentences, some kind of final thoughts that you want to leave people with on just the topic of scaling and being able to do it successfully and sustainably.
I would like to leave all of you just with maybe a short piece of advice. And this would be that scaling is not a race, it's a marathon, right? So stay focused on building a strong foundation before expanding. And remember that organic growth and sustainability is more important than speed.
100%. Niccolo, final thought?
2 words is execution and people. Focus on execution, start from your final end goal and work backwards, reverse engineering your process based on what you're seeing, and surround yourself with people that can add some sort of value throughout your process. It will not just depend on you, it will be dependent of everybody around you.
What they said, but together. Cool.